guess first question I almost have for you is like, what's your biggest frustration with the way that pitching, like a vast generalization, but biggest frustration with how it's being taught?
Closed-mindedness for sure.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many coaches, and really just anyone that to do with baseball, doesn't have to be coaches, anyone involved with baseball, even I see people on Twitter that don't even have anything to do with baseball, and they're so closed-minded to new concepts, and they only really care about their philosophy, what they think's right, and really if we want to be able to grow the game, we want to be able to really develop the best athletes, everyone needs to be open-minded and say, let's just figure out what actually works. We got to remove ego.
Yeah.
We need to really be able to remove the ego.
I was thinking about this actually last night, and this is a really interesting concept that I was thinking about. But so one of my frustrations, honestly, is truthfully the ex-big leaguers who have been there and know how hard this game is. Because I'll say this before I say anything negative, like, you're a big leaguer, you made it to the big leagues. That's something like incredibly rare and special, and that takes a side of this game that I can't comprehend because I've never been there, and you can't comprehend because you've never been there. There's a side of that game when you get in the big leagues that's different. It's something that does frustrate me about those types of people. Is the ones that talk about the people who have never played baseball in general, like teaching people about baseball because of the research that they've dove in on. And it's interesting to me because, like, majority of big leaguers, at least the ones that I've met, they're just so good at what they do that they almost, like, some of them don't even know that they're good at what they do. They're just naturally so good at it, or maybe not even naturally, but they're just so good at it that that's all that they see. And, like, in order to get to the big leagues, in my opinion, you have to know yourself and you have to know what your role is and you perfect that role. So, like, there's many different roles that get you to the big leagues. And I think that that's really where my frustration of this comes in, is because it's not me saying that, like, what you did to get to the big leagues doesn't work. It's me saying what you did to get to the big leagues may not work for X or Y or Z, and that's something that I also started thinking about, is when they talk about, you know, stats, data, all these things, and they're saying that you don't need that when it comes to baseball. Don't get me wrong, I think that there is some useless data out there and some useless statistics, but take this concept for a second. I believe that ultimately, if you want to figure the game out, you have to play it. That first and foremost, that is something that I believe.
Oh, yeah.
But if you teach kids from a young age about data, stats, and analytics, and you actually grow them, and they continue to play this game, guess what they'll figure out? A better way to understand data and analytics and statistics. So, like, if our goal as baseball players is to grow this game, you got to grow the game, which means you start with youth kids. You give them information that maybe that you didn't have as a kid. And honestly, like, I look back and I'm like, man, I wish I would have known this earlier, because it would have changed my career, whether for the better or worse. Like, there's no way to actually tell that, but it would have changed my understanding of the game. And like I said, that, you know, I was brought up in an interesting time in baseball, especially in professional baseball, and I think that I got to see the value of both of those sides. And it's just interesting to me that there is so many closed off people, because ultimately, and this is something that I know, I'd like to think at least, that every big leaguer knows and understands that this game is hard. And I think that it's interesting to me because there's some people that succeed heavily with data and analytics, and there's some people that succeed heavily with the old school train of thought, which is feel. And I think that, like, saying that, well, I believe in feel, so you shouldn't believe in this, is disingenuous, first off, but it's also, like, I think it's bad for the game of baseball. Because I was also sitting there thinking about it, and I think that, like, I won't get off topic here, but the polarization of the country has bled into baseball, and that's dangerous. This game used to bring people together, and that's something that it's almost pushing more people apart, and that's something that's really frustrating, because, like, I see the value of both sides, and I just wish that both of them honestly came to an understanding. Like, I'm not saying that you have to believe in this or you have to believe in this, but there's value in both. That's a fact. There's value in both sides. Just realize that and be like, okay, yeah, maybe it does, maybe it works for this guy, maybe it works for this guy, but hey, maybe this one, maybe you shouldn't tell him data and stats, because he's going to get all domed up and then he's not going to be able to succeed at the game. Because ultimately, what's the goal and usage of data and stats? Performance, right? And if you can't perform with it, don't use it. But if you can, awesome, more the merrier, use it. And I think that's really where my frustration in this game is kind of, like, took foot, I guess.
Yeah,
so.
it's like There's a lot of like the data and analytics, and then the feel and the old school approach. They both have a lot of benefits, but I think it's kind of crazy and a little bit ignorant to say I want to stick with just this one or just this one, because at the end of the day, what's the goal here?
To succeed, play as long as you can.
Right, to be able to actually be better and to like play at the highest level you can. So maybe it's not live and die by one or the other, but I think you'd be crazy to live and die by the old school and not use anything, because it's just tools.
Or not even give it a chance.
Right. It's just like,
because like that's what I've done in my career, and I think that's also where I have failed in my career. So I also will say, and this is something to know as an athlete, don't ever blindly follow. Like, don't ever blindly follow anybody. That's something I tell every athlete that comes in here. Like, I'm never gonna tell you have to do this. I'm gonna say, like, here's my suggestion. Here's what may have worked for me, or I've seen it work for somebody else, or whatever. Maybe you can find a way to make it work for yourself. Like that's ultimately the goal, is like you don't blindly follow. Like when you succeed in this game, it's because you're learning yourself and you're learning the best version of yourself and how to be that person every single day. When you do that, you succeed in baseball.
Yeah.
Like and honestly, like obviously I'm not saying that like just knowing yourself is going to get you success in baseball, but I don't believe you can succeed at the highest level without knowing yourself.
And also a big thing is don't be afraid to ask why. Ask why. If a coach has you doing something, or someone tells you should do something, and especially if you have a feeling that like maybe that's not the best thing for you, if you ask why and they can't give you a reason, you probably shouldn't be doing that thing. Because anyone that actually gives you good factual information, when you ask them why, they're going to be more than happy to explain to you and educate you on why you need to be doing this.
That's the ego there. That's the ones that and I don't think it's. I'll interject there and say that I don't think that some of them don't know. I think that, and this really is my honest opinion on coaches. There's a rare individual when it comes to athletes that you can light a fire under their ass and it's going to actually get them going. Majority of athletes, in my opinion, and don't get me wrong, I think that first and foremost you got to know your athlete. Like that's number one. I think that that's something that on a grand scale coaches miss out on, is not getting to know their athlete. Like that's something that like I really do. I strive to understand what makes each athlete click and what like really gets them up in the morning and get them going. If you don't know that, you shouldn't be sitting there like pointing a finger, yelling at the kid, because at the end of the day, if that kid's going to respond better to understanding, then ultimately as a coach, you want to get the most out of your players, right? So like I've never understood why we also coach everybody the exact same way. And when I say coach, I mean, like there are some people, don't get me wrong, there's some people out there that you need to light the fire under their ass. There's some people that you need to get on. There's some people that you need to push. There's some people that you really got to get in their grill almost to get the most out of them. But those are, in my opinion, those are few and far between. And I think that ultimately, like what's worked best for me and the coaches that have given me the most value. There's two pitching coaches in my career, and both of them were professionals. Brad Bergeson and Aaron Foltz. Those are two pitching coaches in my career that really helped me know myself. And the reason they did is not because they coached me; they let me coach myself. And they started, and obviously I was at the professional level, so it's a little bit different. I'm not saying that you do that with a 10-year-old kid, but when you're in high school, I think that that's really where it kind of starts. And I wish that people would, coaches in general, I wish that they would ask more questions of their players and say less statements. Because when you ask questions, I think that young athletes are really bad at being introspective. And once again, let me also say this, there's also the rare few that don't need to be introspective because it's going to get them domed up, but that's also where knowing your athlete comes into advantage. I think that that's something that's missing in development, all across the board. That's missing in development. It's just knowing your athlete.
Absolutely.
So I don't remember the exact quote, but it was in that Netflix movie, Adam. Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact quote, but it said something to the extent of, you will never live to see your work come to fruition, or something to that extent. And I think that if you take that perspective as somebody seeking information, You put yourself in a good mental space, and the reason why is because we've talked about this a lot. I think something that's been really interesting to me, and I know I talked to you about it a lot, is the neurology of creating a new algorithm in your brain. So that YouTube video about get smarter every day. What's the name of that YouTube? Get smarter every day. And he does the bicycle where he turns right and it turns left, and he turns left and it turns right. And I don't remember how old he is. He's over 35 probably at that time, and it took him 8 months to ride that bike like 40 feet or something like that. And I think that's so interesting because what it's saying is if you have developed a complex algorithm in your brain, which, let's be honest, baseball is a complex algorithm. If you develop that complex algorithm in your brain, it's almost impossible to learn something new. And like you can literally have you can have a sheet that says this is 100% accurate. This is all you have to do. And if it was different than how you learned it, it's going to be really difficult for you to buy into that. Yes. And I think that if you're aware of that first and foremost, that's something that makes it a little bit easier to not necessarily just, I'm not saying change your train of thought every day. That's not what I'm saying, because that's blindly following. But I think that accepting new information, like expressing it, putting it into action yourself, starting to understand it, maybe play around with it a little bit, see if it holds value or not, and then make the decision. I think that just ultimately saying, well, that's not how I learned, so it's not real. It doesn't exist. It's not true. They're manipulating something. I think you're failing the game.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately, as a facility and as a developmental organization, my ultimate goal is to kind of follow the path of the people who have started this. I believe, I think I have a lot of differences of opinion with Driveline, but I think that they're doing it right. And the reason why is because they're seeking information. They're not closed-minded in terms of like, hey, maybe there's, and honestly, I've been around those guys. They don't think they have everything figured out. Like, that's something that I will say. And that's part of the reason that I value them, is because they were one of the first people that told me, like at least the people within the organization, they don't think they have everything figured out. They think they've figured some things out, but they don't think they've figured out baseball.
Right.
And I think that the polar opposite of that, being that really old school coach, thinks they figured baseball out.
This is how
this game is complicated, man. This game is difficult, and that's the thing, is like I think that's the reason it frustrates me, is because they also know that those old school people, they know how hard this game is, and I think that really is where my frustration comes. And ultimately, as a facility, I was talking to you about this. Remember how I said, like, what point in time are we going to be the age where we're the people that are like closed-minded?
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to get to that point, but I also don't want to be that person that takes every new piece of information and just says, hey, it's new, so it's right. Like, we have to value each piece of information that's coming out. Ultimately, I would like to create our own understanding of this game through our own data and research, and honestly, continue to learn the game of baseball, because we're never going to figure it out, and that's a matter of fact. We're never going to figure this game out.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's understanding that even 15, 20 years from now, as long as we understand that we don't know everything,
yeah,
that's where you have to be.
Yeah.
If we ever get to the point where we feel like we do know everything,
we failed.
That's whenever we need to stop.
We failed.
Right.
And we failed every athlete that comes into this
Right.
gym. And ultimately, my objective is give every athlete every opportunity that they can for their own career, because that's what I wanted as a player. And I'm going to do everything that I can for every athlete that comes in here so that they have the opportunity that I didn't have. And I want that next generation after us to give everything that they didn't have to the next generation and continue growing this game, because I love this game, man. This game is so much bigger than the game itself. This game, in my opinion, is one of the best at teaching kids failure. And if you can teach a kid failure from a young age, you can succeed in life. Outside of baseball, outside of sports, you can succeed in life if you understand that failure is a part of life, and not only a part of life, you should seek failure. If you can fail, you're learning. If you don't fail, you're stuck. And it's that comfort zone, right? So you don't, and that's, I won't even say that you have to go out every day and try to fail. That's not what I'm saying. But like, if you're not failing in your life, you are not trying.
Yeah.
And that ultimately is the goal, is learn.
Yeah, if you don't experience failure, then you're not pushing the limits enough.
Yeah.
You're way too conservative.
Oh yeah, way too conservative. Yeah.